not down here very much. I used to be a tour guide here. I'm Larry Beamer, and I've been with the company about 14 years. Haven't driven a carriage on a tour, I'd say maybe 9 years. Me and my brother, we build, repair all the carriages, and today we're going to do a bearing class, a wheel bearing class, and we're going to show you how to do these roofs the correct way without damaging. Billy, you know Billy, he's a tour guide and he helps us out a lot at the shop when we have things to do, and we're going to go ahead and start on the correct procedure, how to do a wheel bearing. We're going to do everything on this private today. There's no difference on the wheels on a big or a private. They're all the same. So first thing we want to do, Billy, we want to chalk the wheels, and Billy's got these chalkwork chalked in the back. What that's going to do is keep this carriage, it's going to keep everything safe, and that's one of the main things we want to do first of all is safety. We chalk these wheels where that carriage won't roll. When we jack it up, we have them chalked, as you'll see right here on the back wheel. That carriage will not roll forward or backwards the way we have these wheels chalked. Now Billy, we're going to go ahead and jack the front up. We're going to take this wheel off here, but before we do, you're going to notice there's a hubcap in this one. Before you jack this up, you're going to take this hubcap off. Once that wheel's off the ground, if that hubcap is on there, any tightness at all, that wheel's going to spin. You're going to have trouble taking that hubcap off. So loosen it, take it off before we jack the carriage up. One of the things you want to do, you do these on your carriage inspections every day. You want to walk around the carriage, you want to shake these wheels. You want to go this way. Every one of these wheels. Shake it. If there's a bad bearing, or if that wheel is not tight, you're going to have a little play in that wheel and you will feel it. And make sure it's the wheel. You're going to have a little vibration in the doors when you shake it. Just check all your wheels, and if there's any play at all, let the off-street manager know that there may be a problem, and let somebody check that wheel out. Now we're going to go ahead and jack this up, and on the big carriages they do not have hubcaps, and if you look at this wheel, you're going to see that nut. We call that a castle nut, and you're going to see a cotter pin that holds that castle nut in place. Always walk around your carriages when you check those wheels and make sure there's a cotter pin in there. If there's no cotter pin, if it's sheared off for some reason, that wheel, that castle nut will back off and you'll lose your wheel on tour. I'm not saying it's going to happen on your specific tour, but that wheel will eventually come off. Okay, Billy.
Well, how can you check the cotter pin when you got the hubcap on?
You can't.
You can't? Right.
Yeah, you can't check it unless you take it off. That's when you want to shake it and see if there's any play in it. When we repack these wheel bearings, we always put new cotter pins in them. And as long as we use a cotter pin, unless that bearing actually goes bad, and you're going to know that bearing's bad before it will shear that cotter pin. But the ones you can actually see on the bigs, just take a visual inspection of it and make sure that it's in there. What we're going to do now is take this cotter pin out. You're going to see it's bent over both ways. It's going to be bent over on the top and it's going to be bent over on the bottom, and that is to keep that cotter pin from sliding all the way through the hole in the end of that spindle. That's what Billy's doing now. He's going to pull that cotter pin out. Now these bearings are the exact same bearing that you're going to find in your automobile. It's the same principle. You're going to have a race, you're going to have a bearing, you're going to have a nut, and you're going to have a cotter pin holding that in. Exact same thing. The only difference is these wheels don't go as fast as they do on an automobile. Now, Billy's going to take a wrench. We're going to take that castle nut off. Normally when you're doing a tour, if a bearing's bad, And I know you all have good ears. You're going to hear that bearing. It's going to growl. You're going to hear it, even though it's not going very fast. You're going to know there's a problem in that wheel, and you ought to be able to determine what wheel it is that's bad. And hopefully we will catch anything and correct that problem before it gets to that point, because we repack these bearings very frequently to keep the problem from happening on tour. Once that castle nut is off, that wheel will slide right off. When that comes off, you're going to have a washer, and that little bearing that came off with that is called the outer bearing. It's a smaller bearing. And you'll notice, I want to show you something here. See the washer that's on there? Take that washer, Billy, and slide it over that spindle. That is the wrong washer on there. I'm going to show you why. See how that stops right here? And I would never send a carrier. That's been done down here at the barn or something. See that? That washer needs to go all the way over, just like it's doing here. When that thing stops right here at the spindle, if that race is worn any inside, you're going to have play. It's only going to tighten as far as it will allow it to go until it bottoms out here. So you want to make sure when you change a wheel that your washer goes over that. If it stops here, it's the wrong washer. Just throw that one away. Another thing you want to watch when you pull that cotter pin out, a lot of times if you pull it out, it'll break off on you. Make sure you pay attention to where this hole is, where the cotter pin goes. Normally they're on the top. One could be off a little bit to the right or left. These are very hard, especially on those bigs, once you get that wheel back on, to determine where that hole is to put your cotter pin in. Sometimes it'll beat you to death trying to find the hole, because you have to adjust that castle nut where there's an opening to allow that cotter pin to go in, which you'll see when we put this wheel back together. So check the bearings out real good. Billy, you can wipe that bearing off. I just brought another bearing just in case. The same size, see it won't go over that, or another washer. This is the right washer right here.
How far does the bearing fit over the spindle, Larry? Does it go all the way to the washer?
The washer will go back to the face of that bearing. That's why it's so important to allow that to go over that spindle. If not, see what happens over time, and over time, the race, I'm going to show you right here, inside that hub assembly, it's in the middle, this is the inner bearing right here. You have a race. This is what we call a race. This is what that bearing rides in. So this is actually pressed into that hub. I cannot change those because you don't have room. In a car I can, but in these hub assemblies you don't have room because they're so long to drive this one out and put a new one in. We have to actually send these up to Pennsylvania at Whitmer Carriage, and they have to replace the box in there for this to work. But I just wanted you to look, and this is what's inside that hub assembly. This bearing rides just like this. It goes right in that race. So actually what you'll have, that hub assembly right there on the inner, this will be pressed into that, and your bearing will be like so. And it just sits there and rides in this. And when you take this wheel off, Billy checked the outer bearing, which is good. Now Billy, the inner bearing, I don't think I have any of these in there either. Yes, we do. See that seal right there? That's what this is. Your big carriages, I do not put these in there. What this does, it keeps debris out from getting in there and tearing your bearings up. They're more, and this is actually the wrong size, but I'm showing you what it is. To get into that bearing to check it, You can take that ball and pry it out, Billy. You can take a hammer, the claw and a hammer, and get it on the back side of this. You just pry it out. That's the only way that inner bearing is going to come out of it.
And that's what you have to ship back to Pennsylvania to have repacked?
That hub assembly.
The hub assembly.
Yeah. Because these races are pressed in there, and you don't have anything, and we're going to reuse that seal. The seal's out now. Now, Billy, if you'll pull that inner bearing out, please. That's the inner bearing. Now, Billy, if you take a rag, wipe these races out, you need to inspect these races. You see how that's pressed in there? And I think you can see why I'm not able to come in, because you have to actually come through the other side and knock this out. And I'm not able to do that because of the depth of that hub assembly. So that's why we have to send these off to Pennsylvania to have this done, and they tear that boxing apart. They may put a new boxing, and that's what we call the boxing.
How often do we do that? Is that a thing of routine maintenance?
We do it on routine. Every time we have a carriage in, and we repack these at least twice a year. Now that's not to say a bearing could be defective. Even though we repack it, you could be on tour and that bearing could very easily be bad. And what happens when that bearing goes bad, it just disintegrates. All the balls in the bearing come out and you got a bad bearing. Another thing what will cause a bearing to go bad is if that castle nut is not tight enough and you have a lot of play. It will cause that bearing to go bad. But you want to check these races. Run your finger around there. Make sure a lot of times they will get a crack in it. They crack. Very seldom, but you want to check those races as well, because if that race is bad, you could put a brand new bearing in there. What's going to happen? That crack is going to just deteriorate that bearing. You're going to have a bad bearing in time. Okay? Check them both, Billy. Now once he's checked those and they're fine, we need to repack that bearing before we put it back in. And Billy's going to show you, we do not just take grease and wipe around the outer edge of that bearing. He's going to show you how we repack these. You just take some grease, put it in the palm of your hand, and you actually take that bearing and just dab it and force grease into the balls of that bearing.
Applying firm pressure so it penetrates into those.
Yeah, see what he's doing? He's taking it sideways.
Balls.
He's pushing it right in the sides here. And then once you get the inside of that bearing packed with grease, you can take a film, put a heavy film on the outside, and then you can go ahead and when you put that inner bearing back in, you're going to have to go ahead and put it in against the brace. You're going to have to pound that seal back. But don't think just because that bearing won't come out, that seal actually holds that bearing in there, keep it from coming out. Some of them may not have that seal. I know none of the bigs do. When you pull that wheel off, that inner bearing is going to come right out with it. So he's got the inner bearing done. Now he's going to pop that seal right back in there. And all you do is drive it back in. It can be flush with the hub, the outer portion of that hub, and it's in far enough. Did you bring a hammer, Kenny, or no?
No, he can use that. That'll tap it in.
Just tap it in with that, Billy. And you'll notice when we jacked it up, we got a jack stand under this. I'm going to leave this jack stand here because I don't even know if they have one here or not. We're going to leave one here. And just again, for safety purposes, always put that jack stand under there in case that thing falls off the jack, nobody get hurt. Okay, he's got the inner in. See how he pushed that seal back in? That automatically holds that inner bearing in. Now he's going to put the wheel back on. And it's only going to go so far, and it's going to stop. lot of these, the hubcaps, are different depending upon the hub assembly. In this particular carriage, all of them, the threads are on the outside of the hub. You're going to find some wheels, threads are on the inside. They're going to have a totally different hubcap on it. Depending upon if you have to change a wheel out for any reason, let's say it loses a rubber, the replacement they may put on may not be the same hub design as what's on here. The hubcap may not work. So they usually have extras here in the barn. If they do, if you do come across one where the hubcap will not fit, see if they have the proper one here, because I know when they take them off, they have extras here for that reason, and just put the right one on. Now what we're doing, we're repacking that front bearing, front outer bearing. We're doing it the same way we did the inner. Now, as you notice, the hole where the cotter pin goes is right at 12 o'clock position here. Make sure that there's no particles, which we pulled that whole thing out. A lot of times that cotter pin will break off and there'll be a piece stuck in that hole. Make sure that's clear before you start to put the other one in, because the other one will not go in if there's a piece of that old cotter pin in. So Billy's putting the outer bearing in, which is all greased, ready to go. Remember I showed you that washer. The washer that was on there was the wrong washer. He's going to put the correct washer on. And then he's going to put that castle nut on. Now to determine whether that castle nut is tight enough, you want to snug it up to where there's no play in that wheel, this way. You can over tighten it, which we're going to show you once he tightens that up a little bit, and you can always tell if it's too tight by how long that wheel spins once you give it a spin. That wheel should just sit there and keep spinning. There's no play, side to side play, or it needs to spin. If it's too tight, it won't keep spinning.